Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kiernan.
Hi, Ryan. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Kiernan?
I'm living the dream. Thank you for asking. All right, we've got to start with the official news segment, the Judy alert. Ryan, where are you? And I ask because your mother, Judy, needs to know where in the world you are.
I am still in Bogota. Nothing has changed. I am,
still in Bogota. Solid.
Yeah. So living the dream here in the almost mile-high city. And it's a beautiful day.
Now, Ryan, we had to shift around this recording a little bit because, I had something come up at the day job, but you said you actually had to rent a hotel just to record the podcast. Is that correct?
Well, my Airbnb's internet isn't strong enough to do heavy lifting like this. And WeWork has this weird thing where they charge more money to rent a conference room for 2 hours than to rent a Radisson hotel for 24 hours. And
can't you just go record it out in the public cubicles that WeWork?
It's noisy. Unlike the US WeWorks.
I think it would give a sense of, activity around us, like you're at a out of office headquarters.
Unlike the American WeWorks, people are in these.
Is that true? Does it get pretty packed?
Yeah, often there's 4 WeWorks in the city near me, and all 4 will sell out by that morning. So you have to book.
And is it a lot of Americans?
It's a big mix. But there's definitely some Americans, more in Medellin than Bogota, though.
And, I was at the WeWork in Boston just recently, and it was packed. So are you telling me that WeWork is still the future of office space?
I think they can figure out their model, get rid of some of their locations that are not performing and make this work. I believe in it.
I mean, I feel like from what you're saying, either they're going to go out of business or Radisson's going to go out of business. It's one or the other.
Or Radisson will just buy WeWork and just run it correctly.
And then to turn it all and then up the price, and you'll have to pay for that. Well, thank you for renting the hotel room. I'm sure all you did was rent it for the podcast and leave. So you got the hourly rate.
Oh, I've got 2 podcasts, so you got to knock them out back to back.
How's that other one going? That Red Line, is that what it's called?
Red Pen.
Red Pen. I'm an avid
going
listener.
just fine. I'll send them all. I'll send them your best. I'll send the Red Pen team your best.
Now, Ryan,
Kiernan, this is what one listener, E2179, referred to as.
Hold on. Let's talk about what the episode is first.
Yes, we are finally going to go to Buenos Aires today.
You've been teasing this a long time, Ryan.
Yeah. So this is going to be really fun. I texted you that, putting this together, I actually started to miss Buenos Aires, which isn't always true for every city we talk about.
Yeah.
So excited to dive into that, the meat of the episode, because, listener E2179 on the old iTunes.
E2179. I know what's coming. And it's like the name of a Star Wars droid I wouldn't like, E2819.
It's some kind of sound technical equipment. I Googled it.
Yeah, no, he's definitely he's a sound guy, a hater guy.
He's a sound guy.
Okay, well, go ahead. You can share. You can share what his feedback to us.
He said he's tried to get into this pod again and again. I admire his tenacity. He downloaded episode, but for 15 minutes of the nonsense banter is too much. So I think we need to instead of calling this the top of the episode, which we usually call it, we should rename it the Nonsense Banter segment of the episode.
Well, hold on. You don't cut out the best part, though. He also said these guys are possibly the most boring men I've ever listened to.
And this is coming from an audio guy.
Oh, God. I mean, first off, despite all of that, despite being the most boring men he's ever listened to, 2 stars. Didn't give us 1.
So he must have gotten something out of it.
I obviously I don't love hearing this. We do read the comments, so I hope E2179 is listening. And the truth is, you could just skip this first segment of the show if you don't like hearing about, what we're doing or our friendship or just talking about the news. I mean, it's kind of true of those political complaints that we've had, too, though I have to say, steady improvement. We've got fewer haters from the left. We even got a couple right wingers coming in and praising us. And, it feels good that we're bringing people together, but not E2179.
Well, E2179, in the spirit of your comment, we're going to keep this short because we have a meaty episode today, Kieran.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I think it's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan, Buenos Aires. I have not been to Buenos Aires, and you spent like a good amount of time there, I think.
Yeah, I spent like a month in Buenos Aires, and I wasn't 100% sure what to expect. Let's start off with a couple facts about Buenos Aires. It is a really big city, 15.6 million people, so it is not a small town. The areas that we're going to talk about today are super beautiful and walkable. In fact, the walkability of the city really surprised me. You could spend all day walking and not have to get in any kind of transport because everything is just sort of around. It's beautiful. There are so many parks and sidewalks and, all the things that make like a city work.
My God, sidewalks. You are selling this city so well. I'm practically booking my ticket.
Come see the sidewalks. Now, the time zone is a little interesting because of how far east it is. It's actually 1 or 2 hours ahead of New York, depending on the time of year. So, I wouldn't be starting my workday until like 10:30, which was nice because it allowed me to sort of get up and do some reading and decompress instead of immediately having to go to my cell phone and be like, oh, what's the emergency today? So that was an interesting thing. It took a little bit getting used to because you do, your workday ends relatively late, but it's an incredibly late town. Folks don't go to dinner until 9:30, 10 o'clock. That's just on the norm on like a Wednesday.
All right. Well, that seems like a pretty good fit.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why Buenos Aires is such a beautiful city is that in the early 20th century, Argentina was one of the richest countries in the entire world. And when people from Argentina would travel around Europe, they would say, hey, that guy's rich like an Argentine, which is a funny thing to think today when, we'll get into a little bit of what's happening now. Buenos Aires also has a very diverse population because they had a ton of immigration over the years, different kinds of immigration than a lot of countries in Latin America. They had a big wave of European immigration, a lot of Italians and Spanish folks. So
are we talking post World War II immigrants here?
No, that's a little later.
A lot of Schmitz.
No, this is like gives the sort of city a little bit of an Italian sort of like feel with the cafes and even the Spanish. The pronunciation, you almost do it with your hands. It's like bonjour, it's like that kind of like that kind of vibe. So a lot of Europeans, a lot of Jewish immigrants, and they also have sizable Chinatowns and little Tokyos. So it's a really diverse city for Latin America. And I think that adds to some of sort of the excitement and the charm and the diversity of the food offerings and all that good stuff. So like I said, I was there for a month. I went in December. And that's the height of their summer. So it was very hot. On some days it was 85, 86 degrees. But, Buenos Aires means good winds, good air. It's right there on the water. So you do get a lot of nice breeze. And there's a ton of trees. So even if it's really hot outside, you can avoid the direct sunlight and it can be pretty comfortable. But if you're planning a trip, you want to do a lot of outdoorsy stuff, look up the best times to go and figure out, what aligns with what you're interested in. And then the last sort of general thing that I found incredibly weird was the cash situation. And there's two issues with cash in Buenos Aires. The first is they've been through a period of incredible hyperinflation. So and when I say hyperinflation, I don't mean Biden 4%. I mean 180% inflation. Real.
Right, let's take serious. It easy on Biden here, if we would, please. There's a lot of there's complex economic factors, and I think he's kept it under control as well as a president could.
I'm comparing the two and saying, look, that's what hyperinflation looks like, 180%. That's a lot of inflation.
Sure.
They also have a physical cash crunch because of the hyperinflation. There are not enough bills to go around. So you can use your credit card, debit card pretty easily around the city. But you're going to want to carry some cash. And one of the ridiculous things is if you get like $50 out, well, you can't get $50 out. When you go to the ATM, you can only take out $15 and the service fee is $7. So it's $23 to take out basically 15 US. It's not a great deal. You have an MBA, Kieran, and that doesn't sound like the way to go. The better way to do it, the trick to do it, is to, if you're there with a friend or a spouse or whatever, to actually.
I mean, I just want to make clear that's not what the MBA teaches you. The MBA teaches you how to hire people to tell you that.
Yeah. Well, you have to Western Union your money.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, Western Union is basically the banking system. So I was there with my friend Chase. We Western Union each other cash so we could get access to those sweet dollars.
I mean, given that you got kicked off Venmo, Ryan, this might be your major new source of cash. Just so folks know, I'm super delinquent on paying Ryan all the fees that we pay for the podcast, and it's because he's not on Venmo, so I have to send a carrier pigeon.
Well, I'm going to start charging you that Argentinian interest, and then I think that'll get you paid up much faster. Why don't I
just start paying for your hotel rooms when you need to book?
It's not a bad idea. So this means that when you get cash out, when you get 50 US or 100 US or money you think can last you quite a few days, because it's very reasonable to be an American in Buenos Aires, you're going to have 500 bills. You're going to have a lot of bills. I'm not making this up. I will post a picture of what 100 US looks like in Argentinian pesos.
Oh, yes, you shared this with me. It's incredible.
Yeah, we went to a beach that only took cash, and in Mar del Plata, and I had to go to the Western Union, and literally we spent 10 minutes counting out stacks of bills when we got there to make sure that we were paying her the appropriate $36. So it is wild. The current president, he's sort of a libertarian fellow. Don't want to get too into him, but one of his campaign slogans was "No hay plata." Is there's no money. And I think that's
oh gosh,
pretty powerful.
That sounds like the two of us going to diners in New York during when we worked together at Blue State. Yeah, no money.
Okay, so Buenos Aires, like a lot of cities, is a city of neighborhoods. There's 48 neighborhoods in the city. That's a lot. It's a big city. I was trying to think of the best way to structure this episode, because this is sort of a 101. Definitely going to come back to Buenos Aires again in the future. Both I will visit and we will talk about it because there's so much to do. But we're going to focus on 4 of the neighborhoods in the east side of the city today. Buenos Aires has over 250 parks and green spaces, and the largest of them are concentrated in these 4 neighborhoods on the east side of the city, which is the city that borders the water. So it's these are really beautiful neighborhoods. I'm just going to jump in and think about, planning your itinerary as in these clumps of neighborhoods is a really useful way to think about, conquering the city. Well, not conquering the city, but enjoying the city. So the first neighborhood is Palermo. And this is the city, and this is a neighborhood with a ton of bars and nightlife, shopping and parks. It's divided into a handful of little sub neighborhoods that go by the names of Soho and Hollywood. So this is a very nice, a fancy neighborhood, but it's sort of newer. It's newer fancy. We'll talk about a neighborhood that's got more history a little later on. But this is a very cool, it's one of the largest neighborhoods. And this was my home base during my time in BA.
I mean, it makes sense. You would be one to plant yourself in this sort of going out at night. Is this also, is there a gay scene in this neighborhood particularly?
No, there's not much of a gay scene in BA. It's a conservative town in that way. There's a couple gay bars, but it's not Mexico City. It's not really a city that has like a vibrant like gay nightlife, strangely enough.
Huh. That is, yeah, it's surprising. And yet you loved it.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty to do. So one of the cool things in this neighborhood, and this is connected to one of the huge parks. So it's sort of a subsection of one of the big parks. So when you explore this, you can kind of go around and see the rest. But it's the Echo Park. And the Echo Park used to be the Buenos Aires Zoo, and like a lot of cities in the world, they're doing, starting to think that maybe zoos are not great places. Maybe camels shouldn't live in downtown Buenos Aires. Like, it's a complicated thing to have a zoo and want to treat the animals, well. So they've actually converted it into a more open spaced eco park. It's still got a lot of wildlife. There's a lot of birds. There's a lot of smaller wildlife roaming around, like weird little creatures that I thought were really adorable, and I'll post some pictures of. They've restored a lot of the old buildings from the original zoo, so it's a really beautiful place to walk. Lakes, etc. A lot of families running around. There was a condor show when I was there, which is cool to see. And there was one of the loneliest camels I've ever seen, and I can only assume that poor camel is left over from the zoo and hasn't met its natural end yet. Because then when the New York Times wrote about this back in 2019, they said that there was a giraffe that was too old to move. And when I was there was no giraffe. So I think,
it got way too old to move.
It
stopped moving.
It got stopped moving. But it's a really cool park, and it's connected to things like the Japanese garden in the city, a bunch of lakes, there's museums, monuments, there's cafes. You could spend it's basically like the Central Park of Buenos Aires. You could spend like a whole day there. I was there for a month and I explored different parts of this big park facility, and I definitely didn't see all of it because it's so massive. And just a great place to spend a nice sunny day. Now, when you want to go inside, there's an incredibly impressive museum, the Museum of Latin American Art. And they've got about 400 pieces of art from a lot of Latin American artists that you would recognize, Frida, Diego, etc. And then a lot of traveling collections, a lot of Argentinian artists. It's in a really beautiful building that also has a great cafe. One of the things I loved about Buenos Aires is it has the best cafe culture of any city that I've been to in recent memory. There are cafes everywhere, outdoor seating. You sit, you get a cup of coffee, you can read for hours. We're going to talk about a couple of my favorites, but it's a very cafe forward city. So the Museum of Modern Art is right there near the Eco Park. You could do both of those, in a day if you wanted. You would see a lot of local and regional art, and it's a really beautiful collection.
So Ryan, what's like the hook of that museum? I get that it's got like a nice broad spectrum of Latin American art, but is there like a special collection or something that folks should like seek out?
Well, this right now they actually have, believe it or not, a really cool Frida Kahlo exhibit that has some of her early work that I hadn't seen, and I've seen quite a bit of Frida in my travels. Big fan of hers, and it was funny though. The museum is big and airy, and everybody's walking through, and then you see this big line, and I'm like, "What's this line for?" And someone's like, "Frida." I'm like, "Frida's here?" I'm like, that would definitely need to be a line.
The dead giraffe right next to dead Frida.
And it was a very cool exhibit that had some of her early work and a lot of photos of her as a child with her family. And boy, let me tell you, I took a photo of this and I sent it to my mom because I thought it was so funny. Frida always looked like Frida, even when she was like 4 years old.
The unibrow.
The unibrow. It's she had that iconic look. So that was a cool part, and it seems like it's really well curated, and they just bring in a lot of cool sort of shows. So
that must have been a nice surprise. I always find it funny, like I feel like because, every painter has like 5 paintings that become famous, that you just kind of think like maybe that's their entire body of work. And then you come to realize there's like thousands out there. And I always think if I were a painter who like achieved the 5 famous ones, I'd probably just stop. So there'd be like 5 museums who each have one,
Yeah. I mean, not the Botero where he just did seven sculptures a day and shipped them to every luxury building in the world so they could have a Botero.
Fat guy, fat woman, fat guy, fat guy, fat woman.
When I was in Bogota, the last trip, Botero had just passed away, and on the State House with the Congress meets, they had a huge Botero photo hanging. So it was.
That's cool.
He's an icon here.
Did he resemble his sculptures? I don't know what he physically looks like.
He was, by the end of his life, he had a few good meals. He
deserved it.
He had a good run. Yeah. Now talking about good meals, Buenos Aires is known for their steak, and boy, do they eat steak morning, afternoon, dinner. There is no time of the day when steak is not on the menu. I found this to be really cool in the beginning, and by the end, I'm like, I would love a salad. Is there a salad available? And that's a pretty wild thing for me to say. Yeah. We're going to walk through a couple of these places. So the iconic steakhouse right now is Don Julio. And from my desperate Instagram post, I was trying to get into Don Julio. I was there for a month and I could not make it happen. And then I was told by my friend that I just needed to pay a bribe. So I didn't consider that as part of my restaurant reservations tips. But I did not get into Don Julio.
What's the difference between a bribe and a little tip, a little greasing of the wheels?
Yeah. So next time I go back, I'm going to go up to that, the maitre d' and just be like, hand him a wad of 1,000 bills for $5.
Yeah, you got to bring like a cardboard box full of bills for a $5.
But I did get to go to what is one of the other best steakhouses in the city, really small place, La Carceneria. And this was like a small place. I sat on at the bar where I could watch the steaks being grilled, and they just served basically steaks, potatoes, and a little side salad. And let me tell you, that was one of the best steaks that I had on my trip. I had a lot of good food, but they really know what they're doing over there. They don't overcook. They cook just right. And this is also a very hip place. You're going to need reservations, but it's a little easier to get into than Don Julio. And it has a benefit of being right down the street from Tres Manos, Three Monkeys, which is on the 50 World's Best Bar list. So I basically had my steak and I went and I had a couple cocktails at this really hip cocktail place, serving sort of, a little Latin American inspired cocktails, but, all your classics in a hip venue. This was really the cool folks who were hanging out in Buenos Aires. And this was actually a school night. And I remember this night because I regretted the next day. But when I found out, when I asked the waiter, I'm like, hey, is any bars around here I should check out for a nightcap? He was like, Tres Manos is right. I'm like, I was on my list. So I was like, fantastic. So just a 5-minute walk. And I should say, in these neighborhoods we're talking about, super safe to walk around. At night, always use your best judgment. But Buenos Aires is a fairly safe city, in Latin America.
I also just want to say, Ryan, I thought you said Cocenaria, but it's Carniceria. Carniceria. Is that like a butcher shop or something like that? It's like carne, like meat.
Carne, yeah. It's all meat.
Also, Tres Manos, you knew Three Monkeys right away. Your Duolingo is really coming along.
Well, they have a sign with 3 big monkeys too, so you can't miss it.
It helps.
So this place is just slightly outside of the neighborhood I'm going to talk about, sort of it borders it. But when Chase and I walked into this place, it felt like walking into a restaurant in Bushwick, Lardito. It is a crazy hipster, natural wine, small bites place. The food was great. You order 3 or 4 things a person that you're with. They have a lot of by the glass options, but they also own a wine store. So when you say, hey, like a bottle of wine, the Som comes, walks you into the wine store and helps you pick out the bottle that you want to have with your dinner, which I thought was super cool. And, I've never felt less cool than around this crowd, because this was like the super cool crowd in Buenos Aires, and certainly this place is definitely worth a visit. And really, really good food and great wine and a cool experience. And now for something really different. There's a famous chef called Narda Lopez, and she's a huge TV personality in Argentina. She's published a ton of cookbooks. She's, won all the equivalents of the best chef awards. She was, in fact, the world's best female chef one year for the world's best. She has a couple restaurants. The one I checked out was Kona Corner, and this is a Japanese fusion kind of Nikki style Japanese place with a great tasty menu. It's beautiful. It feels very different than some of the steakhouses. It doesn't have that sort of Argentina vibe. She's really going kind of transport you out of the city. It's on a great little corner that sits across from a park. It was a really lovely experience. And after 14 days of eating only steak, it was nice to have some fish. I'm not going to lie.
God.
And so
starting to worry you're going to go the way of the giraffe.
so Kona Corner, definitely recommend that place. And then this is a fun little duet.
Just to ask, given the fame of the chef, reservations, hard to get.
It's not her most famous restaurant, so the reservations, I got them like a week in advance. They weren't too bad. But for all these restaurants we're talking about, these are almost all reservation restaurants because the city has a pretty active dining culture. The one thing I'll say, if you're willing to eat at 7 or 7:30, the restaurant's open at 7. You can get a table at some of these places much easier than if you want to eat at 8:39. If you want to eat at 9:30, forget about it. Like that's when everybody's eating. So it's not going to happen. But if you want to eat a little bit earlier, that's a good way to get into some of these places. So this next recommendation, these are sort of a pair, Franca for dinner and Anchovita Cava for drinks. Franca serves really high quality French food. They've got obviously a really impressive meat options, but there's a few veggies on the menu. And this was another place that had serious Brooklyn hipster vibes, super hipster place. But the big surprise was Anchonita. We read about this and we show up and it's like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. It's like a Wednesday and it is absolutely packed. They've got this cafe outdoor culture. So there's people sitting, in tables out on the street. It's packed inside. We were able to kind of find a two-top, and they have over 50 wines by the glass. And, Argentina is a big producer of especially red wine from the Mendoza region. They do a lot of Merlots and obviously all natural. I wouldn't send folks to not a natural wine bar, but this place really, really fun and cool. And so if you combine that with your Franca, make sure you eat enough so you can have a few glasses when you get over there to Enchinita. But definitely a cool neighborhood. And then rounding out the dinner recommendations in the hood is Casa Cavea. And Casa Cavea is one of these restaurants that I love that is in an old mansion that's been converted into a restaurant. It's got a really kind of crowd pleasing menu. It's not a complicated menu. A lot of steaks. They eat a lot of chicken Milanese over there, which is delicious and definitely something you can try here. Yeah, but a lot of good eating.
I can tell, Lord. I'm amazed you got to go out and do anything cultural with all these restaurants.
And then I did talk a bit about the cafe culture, but basically in every corner in these neighborhoods, there is a cafe where people are sitting outside having a coffee throughout the day. A couple ones that I want to give a shout out to. Benedita. This was a fantastic local cafe that was right next to my first Airbnb. Really beautiful space, great coffee, and I would definitely get my morning started there before I had to go to work and, have a coffee and read the news. So that was cool. And there's a chain of like 4 or 5 of these called Dandy. And I really liked this. It was super low key cafe.
So that must have been where we found the gay neighborhood.
I took the bathrooms are funny because it's like the men's restroom is labeled Dandy. I don't know that connotation it tracks because it's really old. It's like from the 60s.
I like it. So what's the aesthetic of it when you say it's like kind of a classic cafe?
It's very dark, and they have shiny white floors and hang down lights, and it's just very like it's got a classic sort of like Frenchy cafe, old school vibe. It's nice cool. without being formal, but it's a place where everybody goes, families, tourists. Like it's just a crowded, happening place like all the time. Pretty good breakfast menu, but I was basically there for the coffee. And then another place right by my other Airbnb in the neighborhood was called Lepes. And one of the things I loved about this, besides the good coffee, was they had the most green eggs I've ever seen.
Was it like a pesto egg?
It was, but it wasn't pesto-y. Like, it was definitely spinach. There's spinach going on, but everything about it was green. The whole hue of the egg was green. It makes me think they're using some sort of like oil that's been immersed in spinach or something. Yeah, but it was delicious. Took a photo of it. I would definitely share it on the Insta. I got it a couple times just because I couldn't believe how much I liked it. I'm like,
that's a really interesting. When in the summer I make chive oil, really green, and it'll really green things up. That'd be an interesting egg experiment.
Yeah, it would be. So give it a try.
An egg experiment, if you will.
New neighborhood, Recoleta. This is the oldest neighborhood. It's most famous for its super elegant architecture, all the luxury stores, bunch of cultural spaces. And one of the things to see here is a Recoleta cemetery. Really cool old cemetery, New Orleans style. All the graves are above the ground, mausoleums and all that. It's really big. If you're going to go, make sure you find a Vita. It was funny. So I met a couple folks from Argentina, and I was like, talking to them, like, what do you think of Evita? And they were like, how do you know Evita? And I'm like, dude, Evita is what anyone knows about Argentina. That's where it mostly stops. It's
right. Yeah.
But she's buried there.
So there wasn't they didn't know that that's like an international icon?
I don't think the musical's old. And, Evita's history is super complicated because she predates the military coup. And, her husband was not a great guy. In the musical, he's not, you don't actually learn his politics. Reading the Evita biography, I have a different view of Mr. Perón and his, he was an interesting guy. Obviously, Peronism's still super strong in Argentina, but, he was also like a Nazi sympathizer, and one of the reasons why so many of those gentlemen moved to Argentina after World War II. So complicated. In this neighborhood, though, is also the National Museum of Bellas Artes. This is basically their Met. You've got everything: Van Gogh, Renoir, Monet, Picasso, Rodin, a lot of local Argentinian artists as well that I wasn't as familiar with, but arts that basically span the Middle Ages to today. And it's a big old beautiful building and takes a few hours to walk through. Some of these national museums are free. For instance, this one, there's no tickets. You just walk in and enjoy the museum, which I thought was super nice. And then nearby, I want to give a shout out to this incredible bookstore. We've done a whole episode of bookstores to visit. This would definitely have made my list if I had been here at that time. It's the El Atino Gran Splendid, and it's an old 1919 theater that's been turned into a bookstore. So it's multiple floors, and there's where the stage used to be, they've turned it into a cafe, and you could spend hours browsing. That
sounds awesome.
It's really awesome. It's really beautiful. So yeah, this is a neighborhood you just want to walk around in and see some of the sights. A lot of the stuff are just kind of incredible buildings from the Art Deco period that you're going to really enjoy seeing. Now, moving to a slightly different neighborhood, San Telmo. This is another one of the oldest neighborhoods with a lot of old buildings, ton of antique shops, random tango halls. Tango is a huge thing in Argentina. You should check out the tango while you're there. And the San Telmo market. This is like a real market. Like you walk in, there's tons of little food stores. There's people selling everything from used clothes to books to antiques. It's got kind of everything that you would imagine an old school sort of European market would have, and it's really vibrant. And on the weekends, on Sundays, they do sort of a fair where people set up even more stuff in the surrounding streets. So the whole entire neighborhood really becomes, vendors selling antiques and artwork and all sorts of vintage cool stuff. So that is most definitely a place you want to check out. And if you're near there, you can check out El Salón de Grandos. And this is an interesting museum. And this is one of those like museums that it's a private museum. It was a building that was bought by this kind of a eccentric rich dude who, when he was renovating it, found out that right underneath it was a series of tunnels that used to be used in the beginning of the city to drain water from and to, basically used to provide water to the city. And so instead of finishing the house he was going to build, he renovated it. Astonishing renovation, like a 4-star, like super cool renovation. It's almost interesting just for that architectural element. But you get to go down into these tunnels and see, how these various buildings in the neighborhood are connected. So definitely worth checking that museum out. They only do it via tour. So what you should do is, if you get to the neighborhood, go buy your tickets for one of the times, go enjoy the market, and then come on back and do an hour-long tour of this really interesting underground tunnels.
Wow, that's bizarre. Is that like on the regular tourist track there?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's a private museum, so he advertises and stuff. It's not like a hidden gem, but it was pretty cool. And a great way to kind of imagine sort of where the city came from and how it grew to this sprawling metropolis. And then the last thing you can check out sort of in this neighborhood is Museo de Arte Moderno. And, a ton of great stuff in this, really a lot of weird modern art, multimedia stuff, videos, like things you can touch and walk through. Some of the stuff I think in modern art can be a little goofy, but definitely something to check out and spend a few hours. I was surprised at how big it is. And then rounding out the neighborhoods is a micro center or downtown. And this is, the old heart of the city with a ton of sort of the iconic buildings. This is where the Tango Porteño is. And this is where actually I went to see the tango, and they have shows every night. And it's this old 1940s theater. Totally fun. I'm not the biggest fan of tango, but I do think you sort of definitely should go to the tango while you're in Argentina, since it's such a sort of classic thing to do. The Teatro Colón is there, and this is their main opera house. It's actually considered one of the best opera houses in the world in terms of acoustics. There wasn't an opera playing when I was in town, or I would have gone, but they do offer tours. I didn't get to go inside, but really beautiful outside. And then the Plaza de Mayo, and this is sort of the center plaza where the president's house is, the Casa Rosado. A cathedral's there that's really beautiful, a bunch of sculptures. So you want to check out.
Did you go to Mass?
I didn't make it to Mass. I don't think anybody goes to Mass in Argentina anymore. But,
is that right? Oh, they've had some Catholic slippage.
Yeah. And then the last thing I want to say, because I would be remiss not to talk about this, but Argentina had a history of human rights violations. They had a military dictatorship that ruled the country from 1976 to 1983, where a lot of folks went missing. And this was a place where an organization called the Mothers of the Plaza de Mayo would actually come and protest the military regime. And these were mothers whose children had gone missing. And the organization still exists. They do a lot of great work helping identify and reunite families that were separated, during that time. And, it's important, I think, to, when you're there, to remember that, this has not always just been a sunny, touristy plaza. This has been a place where, people went and they expressed themselves and put themselves in a lot of danger to try to overthrow this military dictatorship. So they have a place you can visit. You can learn more about the history. There's quite a few. I'll recommend some books in the show notes that I read that were quite interesting. And then the very last thing I'll recommend, because I know we're running short on time, is there is a street called Florida Street that's sort of near the micro center. And this is just a really crazy street where everybody's trying to pull you into their shops and their restaurants. And, we didn't buy anything here, and the restaurants are sort of like, subpar. They're not great. But it is a really vibrant, outdoor, exciting sort of atmosphere. And while you're in the micro center, definitely give that a stroll. It's actually where I bought my converter. Oh, and I should mention, you got to have a converter because they use that weird 2-pronged Italian power. So you can't use your US adapter. They're very European over there.
That's so interesting. And that's all because of like the massive immigration they've had.
They really think of themselves as like Europeans that have been sent across the sea.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
But here we go. So that is Buenos Aires. I hope that I whetted your appetite or whet your appetite. There's so much to do.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I feel like you couldn't pack enough in. This is one of the best city guides we've had.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I can't wait to get back and explore more. And with that, Kieran, I think it's time for the last stop.
Last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan. Well, we're here in the last stop. This is the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the People's segment. And that's because it's where we all come together as a community and we share of ourselves. You and I each bring one thing. It can be anything. It can be a daydream. It can be a trip you're planning or a trip you've planned. It can be a memory. It could be a souvenir. It could be an article that you read. It could be a podcast recommendation. And but it has to meet one criterion. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I have to ask you, as I ask you every episode, do you have a last stop this week?
I do, Kieran. So, I've been sort of interested in ChatGPT and how these things are changing, a lot of stuff from customer service to trip planning. I'm going to do a whole episode on using ChatGPT for trip planning. I've done some interesting stuff there myself.
I've got to ask you a question, actually, on this AI world. Do you by chance, I bet you're a person who probably signed up for DALL-E early enough that you get free service with it?
I actually pay for OpenAI Plus, so I have the latest DALL-E and the latest ChatGPT.
Wow, you paid the subscription. What do you use it for?
I use it all day long for everything. I ask it random questions. I ask it to copy edit an email. I ask it, is there a better way I can word this that's less technical, or like,
oh my God,
It's really good at business emails. That's really what it's the best at. In fact, I think you got a business email yesterday written by ChatGPT.
Do you know, I thought that was very well written, and I was really surprised by the level of writing in there. So it's so amazing you say that, because I did not think it sounded like you.
Yeah, it was me, and then it made me sound better. So I was like, imagine I'm writing this to an important executive.
The Ryan magic was still underneath it. Yeah. All right, so AI chatbots, you're a fan.
So in the show notes, linked to an article, Air Canada essentially had implemented a chatbot on their site to deal with customer complaints. These AIs, they do the thing called hallucination, where they make things up. So this is really difficult if you're a business and you have rules that your business abides by.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So this gentleman asks the ChatGPT like what the bereavement policy is for Air Canada, and it goes on to just make something up. So he goes and he follows the policy that was told by the chatbot. And when he goes to get the refund, they say, no, that's not how we do it. And he goes, no, this is what your assistant told me. They go, oh, we can't stand by that. That's just a chatbot. And the courts in Canada disagreed. They said, I'm sorry, if you have a chatbot. And so they've disabled the chatbot, and now people are back again over at the Air Canada chat. But I just think a really funny way.
Just out of curiosity, what was the difference? Like, how did he make out better with what the chatbot said?
They gave him they let him pick his flight for his bereavement flight, and then request the reimbursement within 30 days. And instead you're supposed to go in before and pick a flight that the airline wants you to pick. So he got, the best of both worlds. Yeah. Yeah.
So now would be the time to search out like kind of shoddy chatbots.
Any business that has a chatbot, especially in Canada, use that chatbot to your best. Ask it for $1 million, whatever it's going to have to, they're going to have to abide. So Kieran, did you bring a last stop?
Oh, I brought a last stop, Ryan. So I'm happy to report that you and I we're getting this Louisville Mammoth Caves trip underway. We're aiming for June. We've got a June set of days we're gonna go, and I've started to look for the more off the beaten paths places we can explore in Louisville. And I came upon one, Ryan. I don't know that I have a travel companion who would make this trek with me, but you and I, we both like a nice graveyard. You got to visit a historic cemetery, and I'm happy to say in Louisville, guess who's buried there? None other than Colonel Sanders, the founder of KFC. He's
we got to bring a bucket in his honor, right?
A son of Louisville. That's a great idea. Let's take a picture with a bucket. There's actually a bust of him on the very nice, elegant. It's not just a grave. It's got a whole pillar set up and a bust. It's very impressive looking.
I hope there's some chickens.
He's got. I don't think there are chickens, but he's got the little the like tie string bow tie, the white suit. Looks really good. And of course, I'm a quick service restaurant man myself now, so I got to go pay respect to the Colonel.
Absolutely. Well, that'll be fun. We will leave a bucket of chicken. I bet you that people leave buckets of chicken there. I would be shocked.
That's interesting, or at least bones.
Yeah, at least bones.
Chomp, throw them out.
What are we talking about in the next episode?
Yeah, so Ryan, finally, I've been after this interview for a long time. Now, of course, you remember the quest for Rick Steves, right?
Yes, with a successful quest.
A successful quest. And, but we're not done plumbing the depths of the Rick Steves empire. No. I've been after, even before we had Rick on the show, which we're still very grateful for, Mr. Steves. And before we have him back again, sometime in the future, knock on wood. I have an interview with his co-author of a book they put out a couple years ago. The co-author's name is Fred Plotkin, and I'm very interested in digging into what it's like to collaborate with Rick Steves and what he's an expert in. He's an expert in opera and music, but what we're going to focus on is what the book was about. It's called Italy for Food Lovers, and it's where Rick Steves and Fred dive super deep into all the regional specialties and how you can find the best food when you're visiting Italy. Talk about, of course, pasta making, but get a little bit underneath that. And then the writing process with Rick Steves. So that, this is an extension of the quest. So super excited to welcome Fred Plotkin to the show on our next episode.
Well, that'll be fantastic, and that'll tie in with my Stanley Tucci episode, which I'm going to make happen. I promise.
The quest for Tucci.
Well, until then, I'm Ryan Davis,
and I'm Kieran Schmidt,
and this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken. Oh, we got to have something here. Ryan, where do you think Ronald McDonald is buried?
Isn't it on the Illinois?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Question.
You think he might be buried in Chicago?
Yeah.
In Chicago, probably ended up in the river.
Yeah.